Brian has a lot of knowledge, a lot of research, because he's been very vested in Bob Lazar as he relates to ufology. And so Brian's going to take over at this point and tell us a little bit more of who this guy is and how he became, kind of like the what's that word, the aficionado on ufology.
Well, Bob Lazar, who anybody doesn't know who he is already, I'll give an overview. However, in my deep dive into Mr. Lazar, I have come around and done a little bit of a change on my view on him and what he has to say, which kind of surprised myself. Going into it, I always try to be very skeptical, especially when it comes to people who are telling a story like he does. I always try to pick things apart critically, and for some reason with him, and it seems like a lot of people have this problem with Bob Lazar, is that you want to believe him so much that you'll block out a lot of things that you shouldn't be, that you should really be looking at a little bit more critically. And I've kind of done that now, which again, I'm dying to know what Rob thinks, but I'll give a quick overview. For anybody who doesn't know who Bob Lazar is, I would recommend going on to YouTube and just putting in Joe Rogan, Bob Lazar. I think that interview kind of gives you the best comprehensive overview of Bob. You'll get his whole story. I feel like Joe Rogan asks him some pretty good questions. I think like that's probably the easiest way and maybe most entertaining way for people to get his story. We'll link that in the show notes. But essentially, Bob Lazar in 1989, he shows up on KLAS News in Las Vegas with George Knapp, and his face is obscured. He's going by the name Dennis because he's scared, and this Dennis, who's really Bob Lazar, goes on to tell a story about how he had been working for the government out near Area 51 at a site called S4 that had alien spacecraft and were trying to reverse engineer those aircraft. So he claims that he worked with one other person in trying to back engineer the propulsion. Bob had labeled himself a physicist who worked at Los Alamos National Labs. He famously had a jet car that he made that seems to be his claim to fame, to support he is a physicist. As it turns out, he did work at Los Alamos National Lab, but he was a subcontractor as a electrical technician is actually what he was working there for. So he wasn't working there as a physicist. So, but again, Bill Nye the Science Guy also calls himself a scientist. So if we're going to do that, by all means, maybe Bob is a physicist at heart. At home, he likes to tinker. He made a jet car. Either way, that seems to be his claim to fame and his reasoning behind this program at Site S4 out in the desert near Papoose Lake in Nevada. This is where he claims, because of him being a physicist with his jet car, he was just the right guy that they were looking for to take a crack at reverse engineering the propulsion of a UFO. He's a very compelling storyteller. He gets into a lot of specifics about what he saw, what he didn't see. He's always pretty consistent with these are just the things that he actually saw and dealt with. He doesn't know if any of it was, psychological testing that was being done, if all of it was a put on as a shell for something else they were trying to accomplish. He's always kind of kept that part of his story, which makes it sound more credible than maybe it is. But his claims are substantial and they're really radical. Just a few of the high points being that we had 9 discs that we had recovered here in the United States at that site. The one that he worked on the most, Rich.
How many other countries have any? 0. We have all 9.
However, he did say that Russia was working with the program, that they were actually working with us.
And Germany too, I believe, right? He said?
I don't know if he said Germany. I know he said Russia for sure, but he did say Russia had something. Apparently Russia had recovered things also. Rob.
Do you think that Russia would tell us anything about any contact with aliens or UFOs they had?
Absolutely not. And
Correct.
in his story, he actually right. He's very clever with the way he tells his story. I don't want to pick it apart too much yet until I go over some of his claims, and then we can look at Bob more closely if we feel like it. But he did say that at one point he does recall an instant where the Russians were there and somebody in another department, not his, had some sort of a breakthrough, and he said that was the last time the Russians were ever there. Whatever new toy we had discovered, they weren't going to be part of it. Now that sounds great. It sounds like something we would have done in the 80s. But again, I don't know how much I can put into it when you really think about it. But yeah, his claims, besides having the 9 discs, he said they were all different. The one that he worked on most closely, he called the sport model. When asked about where did we get these from, he said he didn't really know. He said he just knows that at least one of them was from, a quote, an archaeological dig, which I thought was interesting because you've never really heard that take before, at least in the way that he's presenting it. I thought that's an interesting take. And he claims that the way that these things work, the power supply that he was trying to back engineer for propulsion, is a gravity propulsion. So he basically, makes his drawings of, basically think of a 2x2 square with a circle in the middle, and then take a sphere and put it inside of that circle. That's basically kind of what he said this reactor looked like. And it essentially was an anti-gravity maker, which means you can control gravity. So when these ships move, they're not moving with the propulsion that we use. They're literally just creating a gravity field or a gravity well around them, which makes distance non-existent. If you can control gravity, you control everything. So that was kind of the most wild and kind of most groundbreaking, or kind of, if you're into UFOs, that's kind of that piece that you look at, because that answers the question, how can they get here as easily as they do? Well, if you can control gravity, it means that you can go from outer space down into the water. It doesn't really matter. Which we also see, UFOs in the water. So that kind of checks a lot of boxes. I suggest everybody listen to that interview, make up your mind for yourself what you think about Bob and what you think about his story. He's a compelling fellow. However, I have come around the other end to think that Bob is a very smart guy, but he's one of those guys, we all know somebody like it, who is very smart and is very capable, but can't get their shit together. They can't get any traction with it. And I think Bob may have been in proximity to certain things to give him just enough information to plug into his story. I think it's a bunch of little things that he cobbled together into one really great story. But the weird part is he got lucky with some stuff. When we look at Commander Fravor's video and we look at the gimbal video, we see these things move in a way that Bob Lazar described back then. We're actually seeing things now today move in that manner, and not just by somebody who took a picture with their cell phone. Again, people who are by all means credible, who are the leader of fighter groups, are seeing this it's interesting that he was able to hit on a few things. Rich, I know you watched. What do you got?
Brian, I just wanted to ask you really quickly, for those listening that might not know, could you tell them a little bit about the Commander Fravor and the things that you just kind of quoted and mentioned, if you wouldn't mind?
Sure. So Commander Fravor is the leader of a squadron they were in the West Coast. He was essentially, I'm trying to think if he said he was maybe 8th in command of the entire fighter group that he was a part of. So you'd have the admiral, you'd have the vice admiral, and so forth. He was basically the 8th ranking person in this naval battle group. They were flying I think they were doing an exercise of some sort. I don't know the exact year, but if you guys Google him, he'll pop up. You'll see a lot of great interviews. He's very forthcoming. I suggest everybody does that. But they were doing some sort of a exercise. They leave the base. They get told, hey, since you guys are out there, we need you to change vector and go. I think he said it was near San Diego, I think is the way that they had to go. There was something off the coast that they had picked up on the radar that apparently they had been constantly picking up. When they got there to look at it, he described it. It looked like, so when they got to the spot where this thing was underneath the water, it looked like white caps in the middle of the ocean. But he said it had the shape of maybe the size of a 747 under the water. He could kind of see the shadow of that. And there was a tic-tac looking craft of some sort hovering above the water. Now, once they went in to get closer, this thing would move in ways that it shouldn't be able to move. And then the thing under the water was gone. That wasn't there anymore. So they were trying to basically get as close as they could to get a visual of what it was. They luckily had all their telemetry going, so they actually have some of their FLIR pods, some of their targeting pod footage that you could actually see that the camera locks onto it. You can watch it move. But the most interesting thing is that you have eyewitness accounts from people who were there, who saw this thing and said it went from 60,000 feet to 20,000 feet in just a blink. And then when it just disappeared. It was gone. I think Commander Fravor said he was trying to do an intercept course and it was coming towards them and then it was just gone. Then as they start to head back to the base, they get a call that it popped back up again. But now it was something crazy. I don't know how many miles away it was. If it was, several hundred miles, I think maybe 600 miles away. They're like, the thing is back. And it's like, there's no way that it could have traveled that distance that quickly. So it was a very peculiar and odd thing for them to encounter. And then there's also the gimbal video. If you search for that, it's another military video from another pilot who captures this object. And this one is not a tic-tac, it's more of a sphere with kind of almost looks like a sphere inside of a clear ball. You can kind of see an outline of something around it. And that one, when you see it move, you would see it if it's flat, going horizontal. You can't see my pen I'm trying to use as an example for everybody on YouTube. But if you were to take a lemon and you were holding the lemon horizontal with the nubs on each end being completely horizontal, you would think that's how the craft would be moving on an axis that way. However, when this thing would propel itself or move, the lemon would move to about a 45-degree angle. I think Bob Lazar described it as if you took an automobile and you raised the front wheels off the ground, it would move belly first. And that's how this object moved in the gimbal video. And that's exactly how Bob Lazar described how the craft would move with that gravity propulsion.
And those two reports were independent of each other, right? It's like,
yes.
Bob Lazar had talked about that, like, independent of that event happening.
Oh, yeah. The Bob Lazar thing goes back, again, he first came out in 89. So he's been around forever. But it's the little details in his story that with new sightings we get, like with Commander Fravor and that gimbal video, you can start to take things that we see now and kind of pick out little things that he said where maybe at the time, 15 years ago, you heard him say the words, oh, it turns up like a car on its back wheels and moves on its belly. And you picture that in your head, but it has no context. Right. But when you forward and then you see something in the sky that pilots say, we don't know what this is, we better keep an eye on it, and you see it move in that exact way, your brain goes, holy shit. I remember Bob Lazar talking about that. That's what makes it interesting. Do I believe Bob really knows all of that? No, I don't. But he may have heard things or saw just enough or just plain got lucky. But I don't believe everything that he has said, but little bits like that are always interesting when it trickles out.
Bob Lazar is also known because the Roswell incident kind of died off, and he brought that back into the public eye back then. Pretty much in between then and when the actual incident happened, it just like faded out of sight. Nobody really talked about it. So yeah, that's an interesting thing. I noticed that a lot of I don't know necessarily if they're certain people who interview him are really excited to interview Bob Lazar, that once they're done interviewing, they have a whole new perspective of Bob Lazar and become less excited about him. And yeah, he's got some interesting things. I don't know what's true. There's some stuff that can be disproved. I know that every time he speaks, he makes money. If you're one of those people who believe every light in the sky is a UFO, he's going to be he's the all-knowing UFO.
But he has said that he does not take any of that money. He donates it.
Does he? To his bank account?
I'm just telling you, on the Joe Rogan episode, there's a point in there where they're talking, and he says that he did not accept the plane ticket to come there. He did all that on his own, and then when there was a couple of other things that he did where he was speaking, he donated the money to the high school or to the college. That's what he said. I don't know the truth or not.
He's probably made a ton of money by now. He can do that. I don't know.
He does sell hand-drawn sketches of the sport model for $89 on his website. And he also sold his story rights to New Line Cinema back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. He also wrote a book. So once I started, because I always said, he doesn't make any money from this. He tries to make money from this, I think, is the real thing. He tries.
Anytime he does a convention, if he's the main speaker, he's getting paid for that. Yeah, and then a lot of times, I don't know if you ever been to a book signing before. Usually you have to pay for that book signing. That person's not just sitting there for free. So Bob Lazar is making money off this. And the more he can get that part of the UFO community that is not skeptical at all, they're going to eat that up. And that's where he's going to make a lot of his money. So I don't know how I feel about Bob Lazar, but I don't know. I don't think he's the guy.
I'm a big fan of Dr. Greer. Dr. Stephen Greer. I don't know if you've ever seen any of his things on
David Allen Greer?
Stephen M. Greer.
Oh, okay. I would know, but okay. It's for all
I know. Okay. So Rob, you shook your head. You must know who he is. Like, I don't know how you guys feel.
You'll always see him on Ancient Alien stuff.
Yeah, I do like him though. He actually has, and this is a whole other topic, but just to bring it up, he actually has this research that he does where anybody can join in on this research. and it's an app that you can download, and the app is free, and you can find where they're doing some of these experiments where they're trying to make contact with UFOs. So these groups of people meet in specific areas. You can literally go to one of these meetups. It doesn't cost anything, and you can go there and participate in some of these experiments that they do to try to get lights in the sky to like communicate back. Now, I'm not saying there's validity to what he's saying, because that's a whole other topic. But what I do like is the way that he presents information. Again, he's another guy that really makes sense when he says things. And so he's a retired physician and he was like the founder of what's it called? Let me see if I.
But he does a lot of presentations to the government where you can see him in front of I don't know what
Yes.
part of Congress, and he lays into them
Yeah.
about getting information. He makes a lot of sense. He has an intelligent approach, and he leaves a lot of them guys, parts of
Speechless.
Congress, speechless or stumbling over their words, trying to come up with reasons or excuses or swamp gas.
Yeah. I mean, he does like tend to hold the feet to the fire. I mean, to me, it surprised me that somebody like him has managed to stay in the land of the living, if we go by the viewpoint of conspiracy, where people that speak out disappear. So to me, he's impressive. I mean, I can't say everything that he does or everything that he says. I can't say that I believe in all of that, because I don't know everything that he's talked about. Just what I have seen him in and the things that I've seen him do. And I actually I would love. I mean, this was pre-COVID that I found out about, or no, was it? Yeah, I think it was pre-COVID that I found out about this app. Might have been after the fact, actually. But that's neither here nor there. But that is out there, and it's something cool. And I'll see if I can find more information about that. We could probably talk about that another time. Sorry, Brian. I'll hand it back to you.
Well, see, it's interesting that you said how a message is delivered or how somebody can do that, because that's one thing I will give Bob Lazar, because I don't want to sound like I'm ripping on him too hard, because I think Bob is a really smart guy, and nobody knows for sure if what he's saying is true or not. Like I said, he's had a lot of coincidental things happen where I go, that's cool, because I've heard him talk about that. And the one thing that he's very good at is that he's really good at explaining mildly complex ideas and kind of giving you a real, like, one of my favorites that he always gives, because Neil deGrasse Tyson, my nemesis, who won't believe anything ever because he can't allow himself to, he'll be the first one to say, well, how could they get here? Well, if they're busy that many thousands of light years away, how can they possibly get here in enough time? It's like, okay, Neil, just calm down. But Bob, what's that?
Wormholes.
That works too. Bob gives a great kind of little thing on here on Earth. We have the internal combustion engine because we dug stuff up. We dug up dead things out of the ground and put it in something and shot it out the back to propel us forward, because that's what we have here. That's not to say that there can't be another planet somewhere else that has a totally different way of how they were. We don't know what their ore is made out. Like, we just don't know what they have as fuel to come up with something to propel themselves. So I always thought that was a great way that he would say that, is that just because the way that we had to do things here, that doesn't mean that that's what other places have to do. It's just our circumstances and variables we had to work with. So he's very good at sometimes giving those types of, little anecdotes about things. He seems like he'd be a really fun guy to hang out with and talk about this. But I've found myself much more skeptical than I was even, 10 months ago. One of the things I did see is that he did take 2 lie detector tests. I think the first one he took, there was 2 sets of questions. He failed one set of questions and passed the other set. So the person who was conducting it deemed it, it's inconclusive. A couple months later, he took another lie detector test with a different person administering it. I think it was like 4 sets of questions, maybe. And again, he got a set of questions or 2 sets of questions wrong, and then he got the rest right. Or he got 1 set wrong and 3 sets right, so technically he passed it, but the person who was administering it ruled it inconclusive because he said it sounded like Bob was reciting a story that he memorized. And I said, that's it right there. That's exactly what it is that he has gone over it so many times
that he believes his own story.
He believes his own story. I've had an idea for a sitcom for like 15 years now in my head called The Quota, and I can go over the whole thing word for word because I've gone over it so many times that I have it memorized. So I could tell you that story of that show and be completely convincing with it because it's a story that I've memorized. And I said, that's what Bob seems like.
Right, and that's lie detectors. I mean, it just detects changes in your heart rate if you're lying because you're panicky or you don't want to get caught. But if you believe it or you're a good liar or you're just a cold-hearted killer, you can easily pass a lie detector test with anything. So, I agree with you because he is a smart guy. Yes. And there are certain things that, well, we might not be able to prove he worked in a top secret base, but it was a top secret base. They're not giving out the list of the people who work there.
Well, the other part with his story that I said it's really clever. He does what really clever storytellers do is he gives you little nuggets that can be proven. So most people, for example, he says he worked at Los Alamos National Labs. Well, after he came out with his story, they said he never worked here. We don't know who he is. We don't know this Bob Lazar. So then the story was, see, they've erased him now because he's come out with this. But then what happened is George Knapp, who works for the for the news network in Vegas, who broke the Bob Lazar story, he starts investigating Los Alamos National Labs, and he finds an internal phone record with Bob Lazar's name on it. Then they go there with a film crew, and the security guard knows Bob, and Bob takes them all through the whole lab like he's been there before, proving he worked there. Because we have an internal phone listing that says he does now. So now what do? We all go, well, holy shit, he did work there, and they're lying about it. So now we're more prone to believe anything else he says because that was disproven. But then when you get into the minutia of him working at Los Alamos, what you find out is that on the phone listing, there's a number extension for his name, and that extension is for subcontractors. He was an electrical technician subcontractor who worked there. So that's a much different thing than being a physicist who works at the lab. So that would explain how he knows the security guard, why his name is on a list, how he knows his way around. Los Alamos Labs, after this guy came out, might have just said, we don't want anything to do with this guy. If anybody asks any questions, say, nope, he didn't work here, we don't know him. But because we all take that as a lie and they were trying to cover it up, and look, he really worked there, you start believing the other stuff. It's very clever. It's tricky because it works when you add that into a story. And he's good at that kind of stuff. He gives you little nuggets of things that he did that you could go, well, I'll be damned. He said he was on the Janet flights that leaves McCarran Airport in Las Vegas, the white planes with the red stripe with no tail numbers on it. I've personally seen them. It's cool to see them because we know where they're going. They're going to Area 51. He says he was on those. He gives a couple of time and date stamps where you can go back and say, yep, those flights did leave those days. But as it turns out, from people who were his supervisors supposedly at Area 51, is that, yeah, he worked there, but he checked radiation on people's badges. Like, that's what his job was. So he was out there in the periphery, but he wasn't anywhere embedded the way he said he was. Just close enough to get little tidbits to add into a story to make it sound believable. It's smart. He's a smart guy to be able to do that. What do you got, Rich? I know you said you had thoughts and questions.
Okay, buckle up, Buttercup, because here we go.
I'm ready.
Okay,
I'm
after
ready.
listening,
I thought I was going to be the Bob defender, and I came out going, "Wow, I've totally changed my mind on this guy. I got to be fair."
I have not researched Bob Lazar more than the episode of the Joe Rogan podcast. I listened to it while I cut the grass.
Smart.
And it did not take me that long to cut the grass, so I had to finish listening to it in the car, whatever. So anyway, I found it interesting, just like you did, that he talks a good story. The couple of things I took away from it were I wasn't sure if Joe Rogan was fully on board with them or if he was fucking with them and just kept egging him on to tell him more stuff. I couldn't tell. I've never listened to a Joe Rogan podcast, so I don't know if that's what he does with everybody. I don't know. But that's the first thing I got was when he was talking, Joe Rogan was like, he kept like egging him on. Oh, yeah, really? Oh, yeah. What about this? What about that?
Right.
Oh, I know you can't talk about this, but what about that? And I couldn't tell if he was making fun of him or if he was really seriously interested. The other thing I took away from it was that for someone who remembers a lot, he also doesn't remember a lot. And I thought that was strange. For something that affected your life as much as this did, messed up his marriage, originally they said.
Yeah.
Nobody believed him. They erased his birth certificate like he never existed. All these things have happened, yet simple questions about something. Well, I don't really remember. I'm having a hard time remembering that. It like you said, he gives you just enough to keep reeling you in, but then it's like, how do you not remember some of that stuff? If this was life-altering stuff we're talking about, how do you not remember it? So are you full of shit, or do you just not want to talk about it? But you're right. He's consistent that he doesn't change his story through the whole podcast.
It's interesting that you say that about how there'd be some things he can really remember, and then other things he gets real wishy-washy on. And I'm sure you picked up on the migraine thing too.
Oh yeah,
migraine would come and go.
Oh,
Now, for somebody like me who has listened to Loveline for 20 years and listens to it all the time, everybody check out Loveline tapes. They got all the shows on there. It's great. A lot of times when you would have a guest on, you would have Freddie Prinze Jr. on. And over the course of a 2-hour radio show at 11 o'clock at night, you can usually tell a lot about the person, enough to know whether you go, oh, well, they seem cool, or they were a little bit uptight. You can kind of always tell. Freddie Prinze Jr., cool. And then you could always get a read because it's long form. Everybody is very good in 10 or 15-minute bites. So with Bob Lazar, that's kind of what I picked up on, is that I go, he has his story. He's done little things here or there, but when you sit down with Joe Rogan one-on-one, for an hour and a half, that's very long form to not be able to get off of your bullshit. So you have to pull out tricks and go, God, this migraine, just give me a second.
He has his bullet points, but he can't fill it in.
It's like a politician who has the little, a chicken in every pot and a car in every driveway, and then they move on. But if you ever interviewed them for 15 or 20 minutes and had follow-up questions, you usually find out they run out of steam because they only have the bullet points and their talking points. And it seemed like he had a fair amount of that. And when it's long form, it seemed like it was getting a little bit more difficult for him. Jeremy would have to jump in sometimes. That kind of thing stuck out to me like a sore thumb.
Yeah, there's too many inconsistencies.
I haven't seen a lot of Joe Rogan. I've seen some of his interviews, but I think that's just a technique he uses to cut through your bullshit.
Yes.
So he kind of badgers them like that, and this way he's going to see if he can catch you. Joe Rogan is a weird guy, but he's not a very dumb guy either.
No,
with his craft, that's for sure.
Right.
He was doing enough that he kind of falls into that category because he's very interested in UFOs and he's always back and forth. So he would really like to believe Bob, just kind of what I said. And he's talked about it subsequently that being with Bob for that time, he said he wanted to find out, is he full of shit? could I pick up on his bullshit? And he said he really didn't, Bob. And he's like, because he's a smart guy, and you want to believe his story, but he's been consistent with his story. So it was one of those things where I think Joe was kind of doing both things. He wanted to do the thing where he wanted to catch him, but he was also giving him enough latitude to just talk. And you just keep going, and when I find something, I can pick up on it.
You're right. But where I was going is he's a smart guy. He starts off by he has a jet car.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He's a self-proclaimed physicist, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
His occupation is listed as owner of United Nuclear Scientific Equipment and Supplies.
Mm-hmm.
He's also been criminally charged with pandering and trade of illegal goods. So, I mean, I think that
Illegal
my opinion
goods,
is
huh?
my opinion is I think he tells you just enough to keep you interested because he knows what you want to hear, and he's smart enough to know those things. And I think he has probably enough background where he could come up with some of that filler stuff about the ship. He had a lot of interesting things to say, but again, he didn't say anything. What was the ship like? It was all gray. What was inside? Well, nothing. It was all like it was like made like a mold.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then I almost fell off my tractor when he said, "Oh yeah, there's 9 of them." I'm like, wait a minute, time out here. So there's not only one, there's 9 of these things. Yet, I don't know okay. How is the government after all this time? There's not one person that has ever leaked anything. I mean, I can keep a story or secret to myself for a long time too. But I mean, imagine the amount of people that would have to be involved in the cover up not to spill the beans. Yet this guy here is spilling the beans.
I mean, those are the
you
things.
think that was part of your job, or that you couldn't withhold the information? I mean, I don't know that everybody that meets an alien needs to run around and tell everybody.
Right.
Well, I thought about that too, because I thought about, okay, either they exist in so much as they visited here before, we've had communication with them before, or we've actually have proof of their aircraft. Either that's true and it's being covered up, because the alternative would be where we discussed mass hysteria and all this other things going on, or we don't have anything. And
right.
and it's just and the official government statements of, we have no conclusive proof, we have no communication with them, that's really nothing, or that's true. Because what I'm trying to get at is that if it is true and nobody has said anything because of the closely guarded secret, then something has to be true in what I said. There has to be something so big to everybody having the knowledge that they're here, or they exist, or we have proof of it. Because and then who do they really let know? Because without naming any names, but it rhymes with rump, I would think that if anybody would have said anything, it would have been somebody like him, right?
Well, here's the theory behind
And
that.
so
is
that's
they
what
don't
makes
tell
me
a lot of
think.
people. They don't tell
Well, that's
the
what it makes
presidents
me
all
think.
that.
Either they don't tell all of the sitting presidents. If there really is something, either they don't tell all the sitting presidents, or they do, and it was bad enough that even somebody like him is like, oh shit, I'm gonna keep my fucking mouth shut on this one. Like,
always remember that the president is
Yes.
say the word,
Representative.
of government. They don't have the power, and they don't have all the need to know information.
Right. And they're there for 4 years or 8 years, and after that, they go back into
Society, and none of them are blowing whistles on anything because they don't really know much.
I don't think they know anything, right?
Now here's
and I don't even necessarily think they know a lot about anything at all. But
that's what I'm saying. It's like,
right, so
who do they tell, and who does know? Like, is it that? I mean, it's got to be that bad, because we have so much evidence of people who are eyewitnesses, who have had personal experiences, who I would 100% believe. And
because you don't. I just feel that if I worked for the government and they're like, "Hey, here's some aliens and this is a UFO," don't tell anybody. I think I could keep that as a secret. There's kind of a cool thing about being on that level that
yeah,
you have that you privy to that information, and you would think I'm above all these other peasants. I don't need to share that information with them. I'm not saying
yeah,
that
but
you guys are peasants. I'm just saying so,
right.
but in
No,
general, you have this information. Why do you have to tell people? And we already know that if you come forward, we can erase you.
Okay, well that brings me to the other part of Mr. Lazar's one of his stories is he went out there and brought his friends to watch them test it. First of all, I don't know that they're testing that out in the open. I mean, even though it's where it was, Papoose Lake, whatever, out Area 51 area, still, you got to think there's got to be prying eyes somewhere. The government's not just going to pull this sport model out and try doing all these things and go, don't worry about it. No one's going to see it. Yet they went out there several times, used the camcorder, which of course is not very good video from what I'm told. Apparently you can look it up. I didn't bother to because I figured I know what I'm going to see. Nothing. And yet the government caught him and he walked away. He's still walking around talking about it. Like
they
you said, Rob,
"Hey,
you would think if it was something
Don't do
that they
that
didn't want
again,
you to
Bob.
see, they'd dispose of you somehow. You wouldn't be telling people that.
And it
now
was
what
nowhere.
what I could see, because with that story, so going into kind of looking into Bob Lazar and his claims and his story and seeing some of the stuff that doesn't jibe. One of the things was his biometric hand scanner that he talked about that he had to use to get in, and everybody said that's science fiction, Bobby. That doesn't exist. Nobody has that. And we go, but we have them today now. We have to use it to get into Disney World. We put our thumb on there. It's a biometric scanner. Bob was right. But when you go back and you look in, what was it? Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In that movie, they used the scanner that he said. That came out in like 78. It was also being used at universities before he claimed that he had used it. Now, here's the thing. Does that claim that he made it up and everybody else said that sounds like science fiction? I guess what it does do is it proves that if he was saying he used it, it existed at that time, but it wasn't science fiction. It was something that was already in use. One of the other claims, talking about Skinwalker Ranch, was that Robert Bigelow that owns Skinwalker Ranch? Okay, so Robert Bigelow hooked up as friends with Bob Lazar because birds of a feather flock together. And I think John Lear, inventor of the Learjet, was one of the other ones who was kind of in their little circle. Mm-hmm. Robert Bigelow said that Bob Lazar was going to take him out there to see the test flight one night. They went out there, and Bigelow said he heard rustling, and he had to go see what was going on. And he caught Bob airing up a Mylar balloon. He later employed Bob to go work somewhere doing something at some lab that he had set up, and Bob was just like storing fucking furniture in it. So he fired him. He's paying him like $2,500 a month. And after all of that, Robert Bigelow still says he believes Bob, but him taking people out to watch the test flights, he could have just been putting, a Mylar balloon up into the sky, and then it's at nighttime. You catch the light just right, and it worked for what he was trying to get by on. The video doesn't necessarily not look like that if you do see the video. Mm-hmm. But I had the same question as you, Gina, that if anybody would have let the cat out of this bag, 45 would have been like, guess what I found out, everybody? But then I really thought about it. And if you really ask yourself honestly, if you were the person in position to tell the American public and the world, here we have these things. Here they are. Here's when we recovered them. And you spill all the beans. Would you do it? Like, would you actually thinking about, because people that I work with, they go, no, I think people could handle it now. And I go, I don't know if people could. No, I mean, that as much as we would like to think that if we could, we would just expose the whole thing. If it boils down to somebody having that opportunity to literally pull the lid off of everything and just it's out there, I don't know, man. That's a big responsibility that would be on somebody's shoulders to do.
I think that, I mean, I always go back to one of the reasons why the government wouldn't tell you about UFOs or contact with alien is when we go back to the War of the Worlds radio show that they did, like it was a found footage kind of thing where it was actually happening, and the people who turned it on in the middle of the show, there was riots, suicides, and we already got doomsday planners. And I don't think that, it would go over very well because everybody would want toilet paper and over toilet paper and water, and it would be a disaster. But I just think that, how would you ever have that ability? Because the government, they're going to probably kill me after this, but I mean.
Well, one of the interesting claims from Bob Lazar that he did say, where you go, it kind of makes a little bit of sense, is that, I think Joe kind of brought it up, that is private industry involved in this. And I can't remember if Bob said yes it is, or his assumption always is that private industry was involved somehow with a government agency, because really the government is the loose-lipped ones. If you want to keep things compartmentalized, you do bring in private industry. You know what I mean?
You bring in more than one too, so you can misdirect. Right. So that way nobody knows the whole story. That way not one person can run away with it and spill everything because they don't know everything.
Right.
You know?
Right. When you have government employees, you run into David Grush, who goes, whoa, I saw these files. You guys are breaking this law. And all of a sudden now you have a headache. You bring in private industry. Everything is already compartmentalized in there. It's all, you know what I mean? That's already their own thing. You bring in a private company that this is what they do with research to do that. You have a lock on stuff. I said that's much different than the government if you think about it.
And also, I mean, how do we know that Bob Lazar isn't part of a disinformation campaign?
You're right. We don't.
Because it's another thing in the research is that I can't remember this guy's name, but he's part of the government, and he would come forward and he would say it was part of a disinformation, and then he would go back and forth, but that guy's always the center of part of disinformation, and maybe that's why Bob Lazar's story doesn't necessarily match. Also, maybe it explains why he didn't die a mysterious death.
Well, he's a use. If everything he's saying is just made up and poppycock, I said poppycock.
I love it.
Then the government loves it. The government would love that part.
Exactly. He's a useful idiot at that point.
He's
right. Okay, Bob, go out.
Like, just keep on going.
Whatever you want to.
Right.
You know, he's useful at that point. I mean, we don't have to pay this guy. This guy's out here saying this, and people believe him. Sure, fucking let him run around and say whatever he wants to. Like,
we'll do this over here. We'll talk to aliens over here and let Bob Lazar do that. Yeah.
Or shoot down balloons or whatever.
Well, I mean,
that was weird. That's still weird.
For a whole week.
Yeah, that was weird.
But we think about that too. I mean, like, if you look at it this way, it's not the first. I mean, literally, I think in our daily lives, we are directed by media to look in one direction so that something can be done in the opposite direction. I think that's a tactic that they've used for a long time. And now it's even greater. We have all these social media platforms and everything else, and it just keeps us all occupied. It keeps us looking away from everything that really matters, and we're invested in things that don't really matter. You know, like I had mentioned before in another episode, my son has his engineering degree and has his master's with an emphasis in artificial intelligence. And this guy stays off grid as much as possible. He uses a flip phone. He does not use smartphones. He doesn't have social media. He doesn't do any of that. And I feel like that speaks volumes to me, especially because he is so tech-minded. He can build a lot. He, can build these computers. He writes coding. He writes programming. He's did his internship and then later worked at a defense engineering firm. So it's like that speaks to me, and that's why I don't know why I get so surprised when things like what I just said earlier happens, where I'm having a conversation about something, and within a week I have a letter in my mailbox and an ad from the same place in the same day, right? Like, that's not a coincidence.
Right. But we know that the government has their hands in all the media, and they control what we see, and that's not a conspiracy. We know this. We can look this information up. We know it's true, but it's all bait and switch. We will see what they want us to see. We will know. That's why we don't know what's going on in other countries. We think we do, but we only know their version of what's going on in other countries.
It's a tale as old as time. I mean, you go back to Rome. What would they do? We bring in the
Romans.
We have the games. Bring in the circus because it's a distraction. Let them eat cake. That's the way that, it's how you placate a group of people, but it's also very effective. Just nowadays, maybe we have UFO reports and hearings, and we all go, what? And we all take a look and we focus on it when maybe we're getting fucked somewhere else.
Media is just the modern day Trojan horse. That's really what it comes down to.
Look, here's the bottom line. I want to believe, just like I want to believe in paranormal. I want to believe in everything. But I've said this before a million times: is I need to experience it. I need it to happen to me for me to believe it 100%. I can listen to everybody's story, and I think with anybody that tells you anything, no matter what it's about, there's going to be truth and fiction and everything, and it's up to you to decide what you want to believe and what you don't want to believe. But I think when you have the facts and you have the proof, it just makes it easier if that's what you're looking for. And we do that as a group all the time. And I think we've come away with a lot of knowledge and a lot of things we have proven and a lot of things that somebody told us that was true. But we've also come across a lot of things that people tell us, and then we don't find any credibility behind it. So I think,
or we're able to debunk it, which that has happened too.
And that's our job. Unfortunately, people have to have that ability. I don't know. I heard it somewhere that skeptic is not probably the proper term for it. I forget what they said the better term is, because a skeptic usually goes into it already not believing it. You don't believe it.
Open-minded skeptic.
Something like that. Because I don't want to sound like I don't believe anything, because that's not true. I just need to see it with my own eyes. I need to hear it I need to experience it. For all these people that have the videos and everything of seeing the things, the part that bothers me about most of everything is they caught it right on video, right when they needed to. You know what? I've never had that opportunity. So what am I doing wrong? Or what are you guys doing wrong? How come we're not the people that are catching it? Oh, there's an alien in my backyard. Here, I got him right here in the center, pictured perfect on my phone. It's something you want to believe, and you can probably shred it apart, and you can call me all sorts of names for not believing it, but you see it all the time on the ghost shows of the fact or faked or whatever.
Yep.
Oh my God! Look at that! Look at this is moving on the counter, and you're able to record the whole thing of it for 5 minutes of it doing it. You know what? I don't know that I believe that. 90% of the times you're never going to catch any of that stuff on video.
But
it's there's something you're going to experience.
That 1%.
Yeah, but I think we use our critical thinking skills is basically what it is. I think critical thinking is just that. It's having a healthy dose of skepticism with open-mindedness. It's the way that science is supposed to be approached, right? And then when we find facts relative to that, to where we can draw a conclusion, we also then keep an open mind, knowing that at a later date, there could be a different conclusion based on additional facts that we find. Right. We can only go based on what we have now.
And if I don't find it, if it's not true, I'm not mad about it. You know what? Right. It is what it is.
I am.
Am I disappointed when we go to a place to do an investigation and you hear about how
I'm mad about that.
10 teams before you found 50,000 things of evidence. Oh man, you guys are going to be so busy tonight, and we got zero. So what did we do differently than everybody else? It's not.
You brought Rob along.
you know, I don't know.
Well,
It's tough to gauge that. It doesn't make me mad. It makes me disappointed because when you hear that stuff, you want to believe so bad, and you go, oh man, this is the one where
But do
we're
you
gonna
think that
figure this out.
the 10 teams before us didn't catch anything, but there could have been 1,000 teams there in between or before then that didn't catch anything?
I hope so. I hope so.
Well, right. So is it something that you're feeling, or I mean, there's tons of stuff. You know, how many
I
times
think,
do people look up in the sky and see nothing?
Rob,
They see
you and
absolutely
I have
nothing.
investigated tons of places, and I think we both agree when we find it, we know it, and
Oh,
we
yeah.
also know when we're
Oh, yeah.
someplace when we're someplace and there's nothing going on, we know that too.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you get that feeling, and all of us have investigated together, and we've been places where we don't think we have shit, and we come away with something, and that's probably the best thing is because you're surprised and you're shocked and you're like,
Just like the children's
cool.
home we just did. The children's home seemed relatively quiet. We had a couple personal experiences, but then we found some really cool EVPs and shit moving around in the middle of the night on the recording when nobody was there that we can't explain.
Right. So I mean, aliens and UFOs. I mean, I think it's the same thing. I mean, I'm not naive enough to think that they don't exist. Okay, but there's got to be better proof out there because you have so many people spouting the same thing. And like I said earlier in the podcast, I think that's what gives the people that have the truth and are credible. It ruins what they're saying because the people that are full of shit are saying the same thing. And unfortunately, they give the other people a bad name, and it's hard to decipher what's real and what's not real. And it's unfortunate, but I think that's how we are as a society. And it's easy to pick somebody apart and tear somebody down, put somebody down for what they believe. Yeah. It's just easier to do that than to try to rationalize it. You know.
Well, we know that not to be cliche, but we know the truth is out there, but will we see it in our lifetime?
Well,
I feel like I have seen some proof, but what do you guys think? What's your final take on all this?
I need more proof. I need to see it myself. I need to see those lights over Lake Michigan myself that don't make a sound, and I need to experience that to have my own take on it, because with every experience somebody has, it's they're going to embellish it, or they're leaving something out, or they're adding to it that maybe it throws off what your perception is of it. Just like the game of telephone, you know, the old adage, you know, where it starts here, it isn't the same at the end. And I think experiencing that would go a long way with trying to figure it out and believing more. And like I said, I'm not naive enough not to think that it doesn't exist, or life after death, or anything. We've seen it. We've heard it. All of us here have experienced it in one way or another to know that there's something else on the other side, because we've been told. Okay, we don't need to go into details, but...
Well, I will say, to add to your point, Rich, with everybody, especially for UFOs, where you go, boy, you caught something right at the right moment, it's one of two things. Either the activity is so much more prevalent than we know, that the odds are with you that you can get that magical glimpse. However, to go to the other end of that spectrum, I, like a badass, ran through a screen door at somebody's house with a ton of people there having a party.
And Rich saying, watch out, there's a screen door there.
Yeah. Oh, it was so awesome, though. You got to admit, it was awesome. I was weaving. It was great. But point being, with all those people who were there and everybody who had a cell phone out, nobody got a picture of it. There is no picture to prove that, and you would think that would be the time where somebody would have been like, oh man, I got that.
And the security camera in the backyard just missed it.
Right. So it's one of those things where you go, that would have been the time where you thought for sure somebody would have gotten something, but instead it has to live in our memory. But for aliens, I believe in aliens. I think it would be pompous of us to not think that there could be something else out there. Does that mean that if something else does exist out there in the cosmos, that it has been here? That's where I think we start to get into the discussion of what are we actually seeing? Do I want it to be something that comes from far away? Yes, because that would answer a lot of questions and make things make sense. However, can we prove that yet? No, we can't. All we can do is keep collecting all the information and hope that we get more people like Commander David Fravor who can come forward as a credible person with some instrumentation to help validate what they see, and we can go from there and start to peck away at it. So can I say that I believe that everything that people have been seeing are UFOs? Absolutely not. Do I think they could be? Yes. But I don't know if we're necessarily there yet. But there's something else out there. Just don't know if it's been here yet.
So, of all the paranormal things, I'm going to have to say that I completely believe in extraterrestrials and UFOs and that we have been visited. I do not believe that every light in the sky or every little event that we see or have heard about is 100%, because I do believe the government is going to just let us know what they want us to know, that they have a lot of control, that there is disinformation campaigns out there. But there's something to be said when we can go back as far as the Anunnaki, the opening to the Bhagavad Gita, where, they're flying around. I can't think of the name of those ships, that so many different, through time, talk about the center star on Orion's belt. Something happened at Roswell, and I guarantee you it was not weather balloons. Okay, yep. Something happened there. And there's other events like that, something happened. There's been points like even when we were talking about, the 1700s, there's been things that have been seen that people report and they can't explain, but where are they getting that from? You know what I mean? Where are they getting the UFO thing from if it's the 1700s? And nobody ever told them about a UFO before.
Right.
So how did that come about? So to me, I don't think that it's probably better for aliens and everybody if the aliens themselves were like, you know what, we're just going to let this happen and keep hidden. I do feel that we are probably part of a petri dish for the aliens.
Yep.
And I believed also, too, that the government, whatever's happening at Area 51, even if there are no such thing as aliens and we are the center of the universe, we don't need to know about the top secret military stuff that the government's doing to protect our country. Or, you know what I mean? And keep it hidden from those who would, choose to destroy us. So either way, there's something there to be said about, doomsday preppers and what happened when I mentioned the War of the Worlds broadcast. Maybe we don't need to know. And I definitely don't think we're ready. But, I guess if they're about to eat us or something, maybe we need to know that, I think that. My cats did a weird freak out run out of here, but they stopped at the edge of the doorway of the room. They looked down, they looked at me, and now they're gone. And now one of my guitars is slowly tipping over. And I'm home alone for the week, so I'm really scared.
What if they're raising us as cattle and we're just not ripe yet?
Well, that one. See, but that one worked because when are we going to be ripe? What's the ripeness?
We're not to the proper level of evolution yet. That's delicious.
Maybe they're trying to help us to get to the level of evolution that they're at.
Yeah, that probably makes more sense than the cattle thing. I was just trying to be spooky, but I agree.
But the lizard people are supposed to be eating us. The reptilians.
No, damn those reptilians.
Yes, they're supposed to be eating us. Is what they're keeping it on the DL, hanging out with the government. They're exchanging bodies for food. Who knows?
Oh, those reptilians.
Yes, the reptilians.
Okay. I had many pictures of many politicians float past my face, and I went, "Oh, that's what you're talking about."
Yes.
Well, I mean, I also believe there's just too, I mean, to all of your points, there's just too much that goes back in history. We're talking about even, you know, 30,000 years ago, or 18,000 years ago, petroglyphs, hieroglyphs, all these stories from different civilizations across time that nobody could tell them. They weren't communicating over the ocean with each other, making a long distance call. So I mean, that wasn't happening. And then you have people that have been kind of close to the situation, like Eisenhower's great granddaughter, great great granddaughter went on a TV show and was talking about, yes, absolutely, aliens are real, things that they talked about. And just seeing how it's like kind of woven in and out of the political arena over time. I do believe that there are other people out there in this vast universe, or other beings, whatever they're called. And I do believe that, in the very least, their vehicles have visited our atmosphere, because of the things that are unexplained that we see in the sky. I can't explain how or why. I am open to, not because I believe it, but I am open. Remember, it's that healthy skepticism with the critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I am open to the fact that there would be a possibility that if they could make it into our atmosphere, then they could also make it into our population. And so, are there any walking among us is something that I ponder quite frequently.
Mm.
And I feel like, not like I think about it night and day, but it's when I think of UFOs, I think about that. And I think I'm open to the possibility for that. So when it's all said and done, we could talk about this for probably 5,000 hours, and have an endless stream of podcasts over the whole thing. And I know we'll talk about it more in the future, but I'm glad that we talked about, like, kind of the history of it, how long, we've been talking about it, where it's concentrated in, and the people who are kind of like the main players right now in getting a lot of media attention, or have been getting a lot of media attention through the years with some of their stories. So, there has to be some truth to it. I mean, even the people that are disinformation, they're getting some of the information from somewhere. And the question is, where? Do we need to know? I don't know. Are they making it up based on everything we've seen, and movies and TV shows and Wikipedia and everything? Who knows? Maybe. But
Maybe.
I do believe they exist. I do believe they visited, and I'm open to the fact that they might already be here among us.
We could do another 5,000
Yep.
hours, but I need some tacos. I mean,
Let's do it.
I haven't eaten yet today. I haven't eaten a single thing today.
Oh my gosh, go eat tacos.
Because we haven't even touched on, like, the Black Knight satellite, the Phoenix Lights, Einstein's theory of wormholes. I mean, come on.
Batman,
we got
Catman.
to go yet, guys.
Yeah, we're not done with UFOs. Nobody worry
Oh,
about
no.
it.
This is just to scratch the surface. We will be back with more of these episodes, likely next season. We'll dive into a few more of these things. Yeah,
I mean,
and if you have your own personal experiences, let us know too. Go ahead, Brian.
I think it says a lot that we've gone this long on UFOs, dipping our toe in the pool, and Roswell literally was mentioned once by Rob. We didn't even get into it. That says how far we could go on this thing, that we weren't even taking low-hanging fruit.
Oh, right. Exactly. Rob, you're ready for tacos, aren't you?
I am, but I mean, I don't watch a lot of TV, okay? I don't, but I watch a lot of YouTube, and I watch so much UFO stuff, and I've seen UFO shows, and I've taken in so much since I was a kid. Yeah, we could go on. We could just go on, and I am so ready for tacos.
Well, you go eat your tacos. I thank you guys for a fantastic couple-hour conversation. When the listeners get to this, it'll be broken up in a couple parts. But for those of you listening to this, we kind of went on a marathon tonight with our meeting, and we will be back on this topic, right, guys? I mean, we're going to redo this.
Oh yeah,
not redo it, but we're going to do more. We're going to do more. So with that,
and on the topic.
Yes, we will. We will expand on the topic. We could take one piece of that and turn it into a whole hour episode. But this is it for a couple months. We'll be back to you guys in October. With that, that's a wrap on the season, guys.
Right.
It's
Good
our
season.
fantastic season.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
And we will see you guys very soon. Ciao.
Bye, everybody.
Oh.
Peace out.